This is also, it's now coming up on 5 years from the moment where this first got hatched as an idea. And we weren't working on it for 5 years, but ideas do take time. And one of the things that happened, the reason that I kind of opened the door to collaborating with the Swedish Institute happened directly because I was on the board of the Minnesota Watercolor Society, and they contacted the board to ask how to reach out to the watercolor community because they were bringing in an amazing Nordic watercolorist, Lars Loreen, for a major exhibition. And that was the start of what eventually became an opportunity to do this book. I couldn't be more thrilled and more grateful, particularly to the Watercolor Society and to the American Swedish Institute. So when I decided to do this, I did have this idea, and I asked my son if he would be willing to collaborate with me, because we had talked for a long time about creating something on the same page together. And he has a very different style. He also works in ink. Here's an example. And at this point, I was doing strictly the watercolor aspect. I did the objects, and he worked on the same sheet of paper and drew characters over the top. And as the book progresses, those characters continue. So if they come in on one page, they continue to through to the end. So by the end of the book, it's pretty much an all-out chase scene. There's a lot of characters. And what they do is they follow their curiosity, which is exactly what Nate and I did as we were cooking this project. And so when I think about play, I don't think of it as fun. I'm really serious about my play, and I'm not funny. So that was a lot of pressure when that fun turned up in the headline of the Watercolor newsletter. But anyway, the fun is up to you. I'm going to do what I do, and we'll hope it turns out all right. But I do really think mindfully about flipping the worry that I have about creating into the camp of being curious about what I could create. And you'd be amazed how different that can make you feel about what you're doing. So you say, I'm worried about how this is going to turn out. I might mess it up. What if you flip that and you say, I wonder how this will turn out? It's different, right? So that is what I call following my curiosity. And at this moment in time, we have more than enough to worry about on a daily basis. And so I mindfully chose, as the state shut down, to start a daily sketch practice. And I chose to do it around words that started with P, which is a little obsessive, but I am. And I think I kept it going daily for 90 days. The thread of that is on Instagram, if you're curious. And I still occasionally do a P word, because once you start thinking about them, you kind of can't put them down. It's really fun. And I chose P because I was trying to avoid giving the pandemic all the extra space in my head. But it was really intentional. And so P is also what play starts with. And it turned out that by linking each of those sketches to a word, I started to really go down these fun rabbit holes of ideas. And I didn't actually worry if they turned out. A lot of them did, but it opened up a door in my brain that I hadn't opened for a while. And it's really come full circle into my fine art practice, the mark making and the colors that I use, and the delight that I have in moving the materials around and creating compositions and ideas absolutely translates to what one might say are my serious paintings. I don't even know what's serious and what's not anymore. I don't care. I know that following my curiosity and doing this daily practice has kept me centered. It's helped me see ways that I can contribute to healing, to change, to growth. And those things are important when we're not in a pandemic, but they're even more important when we're in a pandemic. So that's enough talk. about my philosophy. I've been holding this. This is a Corona. And I'm here to say that Corona used to have a really lovely connotation before we all struggled with what we're struggling with. And the use of crowns or garlands or swags is another word for partial crowns, has turned up across history and throughout our culture, both popular culture and fine art. And I didn't actually recognize that I was doing so many of these circular designs. But as I went day after day and then looked back through that thread on Instagram, I could really see that there was something about the circle, the circular form, that was important. And I didn't worry about that, but I did definitely notice it. The other thing about me is I have a long practice of taking a walk in the world, because it's how I get my head wrapped around what it is I'm going to do today. And because I'm an introvert, I also have a long habit of watching my feet as I walk. And so I pick stuff up. Some of you have worked with me, probably have endured an assignment, where I send you out for 10 minutes and you have to pick things up and bring them back, and we draw them and write about them. So here's an example of a straight up picking things up. And then I am just doing a more botanical approach to it. And I am documenting what am I looking at. So that can be a sketch. Here, I'm riffing on that. These are not botanical things, but they're things that are familiar to me. Articles of clothing, that definitely is a botanical reference. And because I have this daily practice of looking at things and picking them up and sketching, I have visual vocabulary. And then when I get ready to play, I don't actually have to look up what does a sunflower look like. I already have kind of a working symbol already in my head. And so the one practice feeds into the other. I do have a grounding in representational work. I really love to look at the world and respond to it. I come from observational realism, and it absolutely is how I have materials to work with when I start to play. So I'm going to put that one aside. This is another corona that happened. It means, the word in Latin means crown. And the reason that the virus is named corona is that its form is crown-like. So this is not any botanical that exists in the world. This is something that I made up after doing a series of studies. And I just wanted to play with the forms and see where they would take me. And then most recently, I started playing with, well, what happens if I pull it out of the crown and just start responding to the layering of things. So I'm going to tip this and hope I don't tip water all over my table. But you might think, if you live in Minnesota today, and actually a couple times this week, that all the color is gone from our landscape. But I'm here to say, as the snow was pouring out of the sky today, I was heading out for my walk, and these are things I found along the way. And so there's something about the beauty of that white that makes the color that is there and the contrast and the architecture of the landscape more evident. And so I brought these back and put them in a vase because they're so beautiful. And then when I looked at the sample, I went, well, whatever day I picked up these things, I wasn't thinking about evergreens, but you can see that it's from a similar place. So that's kind of how I let myself wander in this direction. And I do pair this with full-scale studio work. I'm teaching a 3-day workshop in intermediate watercolor portrait next week, so I'll be doing serious work. But mark my words, something about the play will carry me forward into that experience, and it also gives me energy. So to say that, yeah, there's a lot of work to do and there's a lot of things to worry about, and we need to focus on that. Yeah, maybe. But when we give ourselves breaks, whatever those breaks look like, and clearly this sketching activity is one of the ways that I take breaks. It's like I come back to my serious work, whether that's caring for elders or caring for others in general, or working out what's for dinner. It gives me energy and resilience. So I have in front of me one of this, I didn't pick this up today, but this is architecture to me. It's a stick that I think I picked up on the North Shore with lichens on it. And I just really love the arabesque that it makes. So when I want to just have a way to start and I don't want to think about what should I put where, picking up a favorite stick is something that works for me. And I'm just going to, not doing a portrait of this, I am just creating a shape that I'm going to build some other ideas on. And I say that like I have a plan, but honestly, these things are not rehearsed. I show up for practice. I do these walks and I take visual notes. And I've been doing it for a while. So it's kind of like running a marathon, which I've never done. But if I just woke up one morning and decided I was going to do that, I'd probably be in some serious trouble. But if I show up and I put in my time, when I am ready, in this case, for creative inspiration, my muscles are ready to go. So that is going to be the architecture on which I'm going to put some things. There's a little bit of botanical detritus, probably lichen mixed in with my watercolor. That's okay. I'm just going to bring this whole board under the camera so you can see. I've got a collection of things that, while I didn't pick all of them up today, I have picked them up in last couple weeks. And here, in case you're saying, yeah, fine, leaves, where are you going to find leaves? They're all under the snow. They are really pliable. They're actually great because they have this new dose of moisture. And I can remember how beautiful they were. I don't actually have to see them in their full glory. And then I'm also going to use some elements from this vase of new things that I collected today.
Somebody wants to know, are the sketches done with the core paints?
Yes, I'm working with that core set of 12 colors. And yeah, oops. And I just realized I'm going to switch back to the other camera and turn my face off. I'll come back. Did I do that wrong? No. Okay. And that is also in the interest of making sure our connection stays good. Okay. Yes, so these are core colors. All right, I'm going to bring another tool over here just so that you can see what I'm doing on camera. And I love working with all kinds of elements. They're not always botanical. Some of them are some of them are crazy found objects. But one of the things that I love to do when I'm working with leaves, whether they're brown and cold or fresh and colorful, is to just throw watercolor on the back and transfer them. And you might say, hey, wait, that's cheating. It's printmaking. I beg to differ. And if that approach gets me the mark that I'm interested in, then it's a good approach. I'm going to do some traditional painting as well, but I particularly enjoy how the architecture of the leaf shows up when I do these transfers this way. So I'm going to do another one, and I'm working pretty. I didn't pre-wet the paper, but I am working pretty wet. And so as I do a couple of these, I'll circle back to some of the earlier ones to give them a chance to get to the damp stage, or in some cases to dry completely. The truth is, I don't premeditate that either. I just kind of wing it and hope it works. And if I have a method to this, it's that these are layers. And just as I do in my studio watercolors, I create a first layer that's really loose and light. And then I add additional layers. But in every case, I really love letting watercolor do the work for me. And so that means that I have to remember to use enough water. And once I have them marked down, I'm not going to go in there and stir what I'm doing. So this is now probably, I can get that, yep. So that's dried off enough. I can come over this first print that I made, and I can start to bring in the color. And where it's wet, I'm going to get some color transfer. So I can use that. And I think probably my moment to allow some of those colors to mingle wet has passed. So I'm just going to do that. And then I'm actually working with a single oak leaf, I think a white oak leaf. And remember maples? They were so beautiful. This one's pretty beat up, but it'll still work. And I don't know if I have this. There we go. Now you can see what I'm doing. So there's always two sides to the leaf. And sometimes, depending on the leaf, they are the architecture, the ribs can be quite subtle. Maple leaves are actually not my favorites because they are more subtle in their structure. But I love the color. So we're going to put some maple in there. And when I was thinking about this tonight, made me wonder about the tradition of putting bows and ribbons on things in the sense of our welcoming decorations that we do this time of year. And if that didn't start in a really concrete way with the colors of the world inspiring those shapes and those shapes and colors. So I have to hand it to Maple Leaves. They're really kind of fabulous. So then I don't always get a complete print, and I'm not even sure where I was going with that one, but I love the textures and the opportunities that this gives me to tip additional color into those shapes. And so I am literally watching paint dry when I play this way. And it's fun to do. There is no branch that I know of that holds all the things that I'll probably end up putting on this tonight. And doesn't matter because one of the things that working this way pushes me deeper into is it's a very intuitive way of working with not only my idea development, but with my design development. So the composition of what I'm doing has to emerge one step at a time, and I have to respond to whatever the last thing was. So because I have a physical element here, I can literally kind of say, okay, where's that one going to make sense? There, I think. Anytime elements are repositionable when you're trying to get better at composition, it's friendlier. And obviously you can, you could draw out different ideas, and there are electronic ways to do this. But I just really enjoy picking those pieces up and putting them on there. So now I kind of have this cluster that's center heavy. And I want to figure out what I can branch out with. This is a little aspen leaf. Sometimes I don't even, oops, I'll switch to, I've got one of the colors, I diverge a little bit. I know I didn't finish that last sentence. It's a danger of painting and talking. But this yellow that's in the core set is Nickel Azo Yellow. And I've been a huge fan of quinacridone and nickel gold for longer than I should probably admit. But when I discovered this little gem in this set, and I have the pandemic to thank for it, I would never have cracked open this box, because if you have something that's worked for 45 years, why would you change it, right? But I had to, because I needed to keep sketching, and I didn't have another, well, I didn't have another box I liked, is the truth. So this was it. And I would never have discovered this color, but I'm crazy about it. So there it is. It's a really, it's really vivid. Doesn't always play well with others, but
Tara, there's a question from a viewer. Do you go back to your painting the next day to review and add or change anything?
I can. I'm trying really hard not to do that tonight so that we can get it done. But yeah, it's possible. Usually at that point, I'm adding stronger darks. This might look pretty dark for a first layer, but these are going to dry back significantly as I keep going because they're quite wet right now. And I have been known to pronounce that I am not afraid of the dark. I have a tendency to go dark in my work. I really love color intensity. And although I have stated that I'm an observational realist in my training and in plenty of my practice, I am not, I would say I don't worry one bit about making stuff up with color. It's really a lot of fun, particularly when I hit this part of the year. I think being able to play with color has probably saved me as a lifelong Minnesotan. And probably while I have some of these colors nice and wet, I'm just gonna let them play a bit there. There'll be more of that later. Okay, the center area is staying really juicy and wet. So I said that I wanted to push out from the middle. And another thing that I like about using that inspiration of the stick as my starting point is that left to my own devices, I have a tendency to equal distant things and be more symmetrical. And the stick was really a natural inspiration to make two sides different. And I don't have to think about that if I'm going in a circle necessarily, but because I'm doing a segment or a garland, I don't know what to call this, whatever it is. I want more asymmetry to play with. Okay, let me think about what else I want to do here. The ginkgo leaves are another thing that I just love. When the frost finally comes, when it really means it, I love to get up the next morning and stand under a ginkgo tree, stinky fruit and all, and it snows yellow leaves. They're just, it's magical to me. So the other thing that happens as I'm, where do I want this one? Let me get some up there. The other thing that happens is it tips into my, because I'm working from a perceptual and intuitive place with these ideas, it also taps memory in a very different way than, excuse me, than it would if I were working analytically. And it's not that I can't, I do, but I enjoy how the sensory memory of those leaves falling comes back to me as I'm playing with the less inspiring dead ones at the moment. All right. Ooh, that's fun. There you can really see that colors. Well, maybe you can't. Let me just turn that. It just has this acidy pop to it that I really love. Okay, I think, now I think, I don't usually talk to myself as I'm doing this, but you have to listen in, so bear with me. These are, I think, I don't always know the name of what I pick up, but this was on the snow 2 days ago. And I grew up calling these burning bushes, but they turn this amazing, vivid magenta in the fall. And there were just a couple in my path. I think that besides choosing as an adult to walk for pleasure and exercise and sanity, I had the great good fortune to grow up in a family that went to the Western United States when I was little. And as a result, for 4 years between the ages of 6 and 10, I traveled with my 7 siblings and my parents to different national parks where, usually in California, where my father would leave in the morning to go to graduate school. And my saintly mother dearly departed June 25th of this year, would figure out how to feed and clothe and keep us in diapers and off the edges of cliffs. I don't know how she did it. But as a result, we were given a great deal of freedom that I'm not betting happens the same way today. And I have, again, a really distinct memory of being under a eucalyptus tree in the hot sun, and my brothers and sisters had abandoned me. Wasn't a bad thing. I had my own thing going with rocks and eucalyptus pods, but the smell is such a beautiful part of the memory. And when I opened a little sewing box, mending box that I inherited from my mother, it had eucalyptus pods in it. And I don't know if they're from those days. Could be. She was busy. Too busy probably to clean out the mending box. But to find those brought me all the way back to that and the gratitude of having had that experience. And to be fair, she was probably just trying to get through the day. But the freedom to explore, to be curious, basically to enter my own reverie, is a really critical skill that I still cash in almost every day. Okay, so now I've added some reds. See how this is really starting to lighten as it dries. So that's my first layer. And that is a big piece of how I can just kind of give myself permission to try things, because it's the first layer. These are all dry now, so if I want to bring in additional tone there, I can drop over those shapes.
Tara, there's a question. What kind of paper are you using?
Oh, this is Arches, 140-pound cold press. I do also really enjoy using hot press, also 140-pound. Yeah, I haven't fallen very far from that tree. There are many beautiful papers out there. I made paper by hand for 10 years, so I am really sensitive to what kind of paper I'm using and how it performs. And if I have crappy paper, I do not have a satisfying experience. So people ask if, if I have to cut corners, where can I cut corners? And I would tell you, don't do it with paper. Okay, so now I'm switching to my pen. And I'm not done with watercolor. I have enough on here, and I'm going to grab this pine cone and do what, again, I can feel it, which is always a pleasure because it's multi-sensory drawing. Then I'm not just drawing with my eyes. And I'm going to position this somehow, like that. And I'm going to do what I refer to as a blind hybrid contour. And some of you may be familiar with this technique, but what I'm doing is I'm letting my eye travel around these edges. And then I'm doing a segment and I'm picking up my pen and repositioning it. So it's not exactly like looking at it the whole time, which would slow me down. And honestly, it would be a lot more work. So I love to draw this way. I do frequently use blind contour, particularly in warming up for portraits and also in my plein air practice, because it's that part about teaching me the visual vocabulary of what I'm trying to see. And if I just start drawing from direct observation and I don't slow down and take this time to really see, well, what is this? What are those edges like? I tend to draw from my left brain, which is where my symbols are. And while I'll get something that is pine cone-like, I'm always going to have, in this case, I'm drawing a pine cone object, whatever the object is. I get something that is much more sensitive to the specifics of that moment and my experience of that object. And I really enjoy that. It's why it's one of the huge pleasures of drawing. For me, it's a meditative experience as well as a practical exercise. I can't paint. Well, I guess I can paint. I just did without having a drawing. But typically I make some kind of guideline. When I'm doing these kinds of explorations, I intentionally do not create a drawing because that would shift me back into my analysis and I would have to forfeit the intuitive playfulness of just figuring out one shape at a time and seeing, you know, following that question, I wonder what would happen if, following my curiosity, not my worry, and seeing what happens. So there is, while not perfect, there is that particular angle. And you'll notice that the pen, I'm using a TWSBI mini fountain pen with black ink. And I do really love how it bleeds.
Can you say that again, Tara?
Yeah. Yep, I love how it bleeds into the wet areas. So rather than worrying about that happening because I know that my surface isn't dry yet, I am intentionally working it while it is damp and wet because I enjoy how this line spreads or bleeds.
What kind of pen? I don't think they heard the kind of pen it is.
It's a TWSBI, TWSBI, I think, mini. And I used to use disposable Stetlers and microns, which are really wonderful tools. But I was trying to be more environmentally responsible. So I switched to this fountain pen, I want to say a year and a half ago. And I have never looked back. I absolutely love it. It's refillable with carbon ink. There's my ink. And I can fly with it. Remember when we could fly? It doesn't explode on planes. Some of my pens used to explode. And I love the variety of line that I can get with it. The prefab pens, convenience pens, as I think of them now, have more uniform line, and I really love the variety. So there's a really juicy bleed. And for this pine cone, because I probably am going to play with the negative space, it's an opportunity to mingle a whole bunch of colors. It kind of doesn't matter what those edges do. It's not going to get in the way. In the first one, I had more of kind of a combination of the part that's catching light. And in this, I'm more interested in just the part that's catching light. I don't know why. It's just how it's hitting me.
Tara, there's one more question about the pen, and that's
Sure.
the nib size.
Oh, it's the finest. I can't remember what they call it. I think it's extra fine is what it's called.
Okay, thank you.
But it could be super fine, you know, like that. Whatever the finest nib is, that's what this is. And you wouldn't know that it's a fine when I'm using it on the wet surface, which is one of the things I love about it. I can get a really fat, juicy mark. I just let the water do my work. I'm also embarrassed to say I do not know. My dad was a biologist, and I don't know what kind of pine cone this is, but it was in my path, so I picked it up. Okay, so we have some ink. And then what else do I want to do with ink? I'm going to switch back to some watercolor. And no, maybe not. I'm going to drop some. Get some things going in this negative space. So I have been working on my lights, and you can tell that what I'm doing here is not light at all. And I can do that. I have the prerogative of shifting to my darks. When I am working wet into wet in a shape, as I am here, I don't necessarily want to come back and redo these layers. And I do this in portraits too, when I get an area. Typically, I'm working light, medium, dark, 3 layers. I do my value studies when I'm doing an analytical approach. But when I can see that dark is where this is going, it's really fun to me to go for it, because the watercolor doesn't get overhandled, and you get these beautiful aqueous blends that just don't happen any other way. So you can really start to see that come alive now, I hope. And the, what happened to me? Here we go. Let's just look at that. So here, I mean, I'm making stuff up, but I can flip back to observation when I need to. And the reason I picked this up is I all of a sudden am not sure what this frontal area does. Does it catch light? And in fact, it catches light. It's not as strongly a negative space. So I can bring that in. And that's about all the harder I'm going to work on that. And then I'm going to flip it. I use the same one to do 2 cones. And come over here. This is a design. I mean, a lot of this, they're just shapes. So I'm making design choices that are not necessarily about what color is a pine cone, as they are about what color do I feel like I want to have there. And I'm also not going quite as dark on this one. While it's wet, I can change that. I used a completely different color. I don't typically use prefab browns or blacks or even greens or oranges. So what do I use? That would be a question, right? I use a split primary limited palette. And I love doing that because it pushes me really deeply into understanding what those colors can do for me. And I can keep my focus on I can keep my focus on my painting, because I'm so familiar with what these 6 or 7 colors do. And obviously there's more in this set than that, but I tend to reach for the same 2 reds, 2 yellows, and 2 blues, no matter what palette I'm in front of. All right, while this is a big wet puddle of, I'm going to have to rotate this. This is when you're trying to make lines and have fun making the line, it can be really difficult to do that if you are drawing against your natural stroke. So I rotated this. I'm going to do this, well, whatever this is. I don't exactly know, some leafy pod or some dried pod. And I'm just going to pull these out of this with my brush handle. Then I'll pick it up and let that juicy part run over to this one. And I'm going to try the same thing. So this is, I'm right-handed, and it's much easier for me to do in this direction. I don't have to turn it. All right, so that gives me some more ideas for what these might do. And I'm actually going to make, I'm not talking too much about what I'm mixing and when, because I'm, ooh, that is way too green. All right. What I'm doing right now is I'm taking quinacridone and nickel gold, and I dropped, it's a really orangey yellow, which I enjoy. There is no orange that I don't like. So that means I like a lot of yellows too. But what I did was I mixed it with a little blue. And because it's a little bit leaning to the orange, I get a grayer brown, which is what I'm after. Right. I have to do this so you can see what I'm doing while I do it. And I'm crazy about these pods. I also don't know what they are. Dried stuff is really easy to spot in the snow all winter long. So if you don't get to this right away, don't despair. All of the things that I'm working with tonight are going to be available the whole 6 months. And then I can pull that down, shut down. Oh, I kind of like that one like that. So I can start to get, I'm kind of getting a gradation for free. I did a dark coming up. I like that broken stroke, and then I'm what do we want to do here? I think, in fact, I want one coming out this way. I doubt if this is as much fun to watch as it is to do. So I do hope you'll try it. And I will just say I've been kind of fixated on these for, I don't do them every day, but I keep walking and I keep picking stuff up. So my porch has little trays. You'd think it's my grandchildren, and it's not, it's me. Little trays of stuff. Because I never know when it might be just exactly what I need. And then I try another one. So what I want to say is, if the first time you try this, it's not as thrilling as you thought it was going to be, don't give up. One of the things that I find is really essential in my own thinking, and I say this to participants in my classes and workshops too, is that you have to let go of the product in order to embrace the product. You have to let go of a product in order to embrace particularly a new process. And if you don't do that, the judgment part can stop you from being curious and keep you more focused on worry or how it's going to turn out. Anytime you're asking how it's going to turn out, you're thinking about your process. At whatever point I have an area that I want to soften, I just did it. I can pick it up with my paper towel. And if I'm trying to, I want a little more, there we go. A little separation there. I didn't end up using that one, so I'm just gonna pick that one up. And because I've handled these pretty, as I'm laying down color, I'm not scrubbing it. I'm not worrying it into the paper. So when I get ready to lift up, or in this case, I'm just picking up my excess moisture because it's done doing its work for me. And I want to give that a chance to dry before I leave you tonight. So I have some other plans for it. So because I do that, even though I use really vivid and a lot of staining colors, I can get away with it because of how I handle paint. So I'm going to leave some whites in there because I kind of like that focus. This is a little juicier than I need for it to be. So here's my paper towel. The first layer is dry. The second layer is dark and running over it, and I can just pick it up the way it goes, just like erasing. Then I need a little more of this muddy purple because I want to just want these forms back here, but I don't, not everything can be the star of the show. And so far it looks like maybe those cones and something else I haven't thought of is going to do that. Yeah.
Or just so you know, you're at your 10-minute mark.
Oh, am I really? Well, shoot. Okay, we got to speed date this. So this object I have had for a couple months, and I'm crazy about it. It's something from a packaging, but it makes this great mark. So we'll I can't leave before I show you how fun this is. So I do the same thing that I did with the leaves. So I'm basically thinking like a printmaker. I'm not a printmaker. Some of you probably are, so don't be offended. And then I can drop this right on here, and it makes this beautiful little honeycomb pattern that I love to build stuff on. And if I were really trying to create that honeycomb pattern, I could do it, but it would take me a while. So I love how quickly I can get that. And if I want to do a darker one, I can dip that right into my juicy pine cone, and I can transfer stuff from that. Fun. So this is a precious object. Anybody that throws this away is going to be in big trouble with me. Nobody throws anything away. On me anyway. Okay, and I'm just going to keep watching that edge because I did get that quite wet. I want to go in here and use another pseudo printmaking tool. It's a mechanical pencil, and I need some more of my, I didn't talk about what I mixed for that first gray, but I used ultramarine as my blue and quin magenta as the red, and then some of the quinacridone gold. So I'm coming back to that blue, and what I'm going to do, I think I'm actually going to stamp this. So I'll turn my palette so you can see it. There's my puddle of an inky blue, and I'm just going to do this. I don't know what kind of berries these are, but I actually did, if you have a photographic memory, you might recall that there was a little cluster of berries with red stems in that sketch that I showed when I was talking about if I'm feeling like this is an observational day and I find a cool thing and I want to get more familiar with it, I go ahead and do studies of it because then they're mine. I can go back to that study if I need to. Usually I don't have to once I do the study, it sticks in my brain in a different way. And so this, whatever this berry, wasn't a grape. I don't know what it was. Maybe, I'm not even going to say. I need to have another whole lifetime to know the names of what I'm doing. So here's where I have to be careful that I don't put, careful in my mind, as careful as I get, that I don't put an inky blue stamp on every intersection, because that would be the thing that I talked about it when I used the stick, that I fight that instinct to do one of these here and one of these here. I think it's because we come into the world for the most part with two of everything, and so symmetry makes some sense to us. Okay, so there's some berries, and then I can't stop until I do whatever this beautiful, some kind of pine, this. And I hope I have time for some rose hips, because I'm crazy about those rose hips. Also, you know, this could change, Elizabeth. I could send you it, but look at the color, the rose hips. And these are rugosa, the wild roses. And they turn this stunning orange. They were all over in the snow. Okay, so.
Tara, we've got one other little question about what
Sure.
you have your artwork stapled to the board.
Oh, thank you for that question. So I have my artwork stapled to political lawn sign board, corrugated plastic. And regardless of how we voted, it's good for something beyond the election. So if you have a yard sign that you're all done with, I'm not saying you are, but you might be, and you want to do something really responsible with it, bring it into your studio and staple watercolor paper to it. I love it. It's really lightweight. And when I want to create, I sometimes packaging tape two of them together so that I have a thicker volume. And they're just really lightweight. They're very portable. I can do them in different sizes and get the material for free. What could be better? Okay, so this is my reference. I'm going to set that aside. And what I did was I put some puddles of green on there. And I'm, whoops, wrong tool. I'm going to use my brush handle. I never talked about this brush. I'm crazy about this brush. It is an Escoda Synthetico. I also use a Perla, a number 10. It's a number 10 round. It's not the only brush I use, but I do really like using it for this kind of playful exercise where I'm doing transfer prints and botanicals, because it has a great handle for what I'm doing with it right now, and it holds enough water. It gives me a point when I want it. It's springy, so if I need to do lifts, it's just a really versatile brush. And so what I did was I started these pine-like clusters with a little blob. And I didn't try to say, you know, that's a needle, it's not a needle. I'm using this is another reason that good paper matters, because I'm kind of wailing on this paper, but it'll hold up to it. I think I might need, think about this, I might need another blob here. And then think this through, maybe this direction. All right, then I'm going to take a dip pen, good old calligraphy dip pen, I did not think of this myself. A really wonderful artist named S.D. McLeod turned me on to a dip pen as a watercolor tool. It had never occurred to me. And it makes the same mark that it makes when you're, gotta switch hands, when you're using it with traditional ink. It's thin, but you can load your watercolor, whatever watercolor you're working with, into it. So you don't have to have a gazillion bottles of custom ink. You just need a brush. You're not truly dipping the pen, you're loading the brush. You're loading the pen from the brush, which is amazingly effective. And I also love that I can start to change up. You know, I did some of my new love, the nickel Azo Yellow, did those first. And then I'm bringing in some phthalo blue, which is an old friend. I think our celebrations are going to be different this year. And so it could be that in addition to just really loving the Corona as a shape, that I am celebrating one small step at a time while whenever I can, however I can. And I do these things smaller scale, and I send them to people because I can't be with people in the same way that I could other years. So for some people that works better if you do these ideas card sized, and everything I'm doing works fine on a smaller sheet. So if this feels beyond you in terms of time and size, think about a greeting card sized surface area. Okay, we have just one more. Can I do one more ink thing?
You bet. Of course.
You can do that? All right. So I had a really strong central ink motif, and I don't know what these trees are, but they're the small leaves blow into my house at the end of the season, and mostly I pick them up, but believe me, I know what these look like. So although I have one, I don't really need to look at it. And I want some little element here that allows my ink line in the center to wander a little bit further out and make friends with some elements that are out here in the netherland. So I am throwing those in there as quickly as I can. And then again, I can kind of spot what I need to do with it. So I can get sorry, I gotta rotate that again so I can. And you can see that I am, after all that mark making that I did earlier, I'm literally dropping these ink lines right over the top of it. How's that going to work? Wait till you see. It is the joy of layering.
Tara, somebody wants to know what size you're working on right now.
Oh, the piece of paper?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't measure it. I chose this size because I was thinking about trying to keep myself from going off camera. I would say it's about 8 inches by 12 inches, but I could measure it. Sorry to be so vague. Let me get one more. And then if I may, I know I'm over time. You can tell me when time's up. No more, Tara. I want to show just a little bit of the negative painting that I do for the last layer. So I've sort of never said, okay, I'm done with light. I'm working my next layer, but you can tell I did a bunch of darks. So what I do is I go back into here. At this point, it's usually completely dry. And after I get these inked shapes in there, I can, then I can start to, I can negative paint around whatever elements I want to call attention to. So I can drop a little of the dark. That's probably going to bleed. This can get darker. And sometimes I do a color shift because that's what it needs. So I might drop green over this instead of orange because I want to separate it from the warmth of the pine cone. And then all I'm doing is I'm strengthening these shapes that I laid down earlier. And they run through the ink shape that I did for the little leaves, but because I'm painting around them, you start to see the leaf, which is how I get away with it. And then same thing up here, if I want to show you that, and call attention to the shape in front of it, I'm going to strengthen the negative shape. I would say Quin Magenta is another love that has come out of this. That's the color I'm dropping in right now. Out of the process of relinquishing my old love, my old travel palette to the exhibit, has been that I've discovered Quin Magenta, and I do like it. Okay, and then this is it. This is the last thing. I'm just going to take a little of that Quin Magenta, and I want to suggest a little dimension on the stamps that I made with my mechanical pencil, because they're pretty regular and I want them to feel a little more organic. And what did I do with my ink pen? Here we go. And then I can come in here and using that honeycomb structure that's so handy, I can start to suggest how these berry forms go together. And I'm not literally drawing every honeycomb, but it's enough there that it makes that really fast to do. So again, there's some compositional choices in there. And I think that's all that I have time for. So I'm going to stop. There it is.
That is wonderful, Tara. Thank you so much. This is our time for questions. Another one came up of what is the sketchbooks that you use every day or when you go out?
That's a wonderful question. And I have a bunch of answers because I have different ones depending on what kind of going out I'm doing. I'm feeling like I need a few more of these dots over here. I am going to reach off camera and grab a couple favorites. I love these, Moleskine. It's a 90-pound watercolor paper. I travel with these. They never bleed through to the back side. I can do a really light ink. This was with the Stettler pen. That was back in the day of the Stettler pen. And I can back it with strong color and it never bleeds through for me. So I absolutely love this when I want to travel with a sketchbook. It has a pocket at the back that I can tuck things into. So I'll use this for Another one that's out of my reach is where I have a bunch of botanicals from the North Shore. I did lose one of these once. So the other thing I love about it is that there's, in case of loss, please return to. So I used to laugh at that, and now I fill that out. And then there's a line that says how much reward you can give if you find it and return it. Good karma is what I say. I like, I think that here it is. I love these this is probably bigger than my camera will capture, but I really like, it's a mixed media. I think the cover is different now. I bought a crate of it a long time ago, but it's called Nature Sketch, and it's 25% cotton. It's 130 pound. It responds really well to watercolor. This is quite dense. There's no ink on this. This is just watercolor. And then it's also really great with ink. So it kind of flips both things, or either or. When I, let me grab one more. When I want to switch back and forth between ink and watercolor. So I like that one for its versatility. I tend to keep that one here in my studio because I mean, I doodle everywhere, but I like having a bigger surface when I don't have to carry it somewhere. And then this one, some of you have worked with me on, it's an accordion format. And I love that when I'm going ultra light, also often in a travel setting, because it fits in the little bag that I wear for my evening glass of wine. And I can put my tiny little palette that I will soon get back, January 24th, when the exhibit closes. And then I'm ready to sketch on site if I want to. So those are some favorites. But my advice on surfaces is buy the best you can and do not save them for good work. Your work is good. So use those good surfaces and enjoy the pleasure of your process, because it's as important, if not more important, than your product. It's what feeds you. It gives you that resilience to go back and do the hard work that we're asked to do. I wish you the best with all of that and what that means for your life. I want to thank all of you and the Minnesota Watercolor Society for hosting me, giving me an opportunity to share a way that I love to work. Thank you.